All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik wa an'im ala Sayyidina wa Habibina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallam amma ba'd. All right. So last dars, we had gone over the mehr of Sitna Fatima alayhi salam radiallahu anha. We also had gone over the iris, the celebration, and we spoke about how Sitna Salama and Sitna Aisha radiallahu anhuma had prepared her, Sitna Fatima, that is, alayhi salam, for her wedding night. We spoke about how the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam had essentially furnished the home of Sitna Fatima alayhi salam by the gifts that he had given her. We also had discussed how the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam told Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu to use the mehr for Sitna Fatima, 2/3 of which for perfumes, for utul. Okay, I think it should be okay now. Sorry, I saw I was freezing up there again. To use 2/3 for perfumes or utur and 1/3 for clothes. For Sitna Fatima alayhi salam, of course, not for himself. And like we said, Sitna Aisha and Sitna Salama radiallahu anhunna had prepared their home as well, and we discussed about how they kind of found the softest sand that they could find available to kind of make the floor as soft and gentle as possible on their feet, etc. And then we also discussed at the end of the dars how when it was time, sorry, every time I see it freeze, I'm gonna stop, and when I see it get back on, continue inshallah. How the community had stepped up. So we had said, sorry guys, I noticed it's freezing a lot. I don't know why, but Abba had stepped up and said, I'll take care of such and such, and I'll take care of such and such. Again, the point of that was to show how the community had, stepped up, took care of the food and the entertainment, if you would, for the wedding, as opposed to the groom and the bride. So they took that stress off of them, and like we said, they prepared their home for them. They got them. The Prophet ﷺ had furnished their home for them, essentially, etc., etc. And today we get into An-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam yad'u lil-arsan. This is a very long hadith, but obviously we'll break it up, inshallah. But this is showing how the Prophet ﷺ made or had special sunnahs, okay, right, basically for the wedding night for Sitna Fatima alayhi salam and for Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam as well. And we'll look into the details right now, inshallah. So عن علي كرم الله وجهه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حين زوجه فاطمة عليه السلام دعا بماء فمجه ثم أدخله معه فرشه في جيبه وبين كتفيه وعوذه بقل هو الله أحد. So Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu alayhi salam, he said that when the night that the Prophet alayhi salam was essentially giving Fatima in marriage to Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, he said that the Prophet alayhi salam had taken some water, he had read some Quran on the water, and he kind of sprinkled that water on Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, and he said specifically on his pocket, kind of like his, the pocket that you have like on your shirt, like on a dress shirt type thing. He sprinkled it on his pocket as a form of barakah, to put barakah in his wealth, essentially. And he said he also sprinkled the blessed water that the Prophet ﷺ had blessed for them, in between his shoulders. And he said he also read قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ and al-mu'awwidhatayn, obviously قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. And then after doing that, so this he did with Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, and then after doing that, he called Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam. I'm just going to translate the Arabic because, like I said, this hadith is short, but the one after, the hadith itself is literally 2 pages long. Okay, so if I read the Arabic and then translate it, we'll completely be out of time. So then after doing this with Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, he called Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam, فقامت تمشي. So she came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. She was very shy. And then the Prophet ﷺ said something really important to her and very special. He says, essentially, he's telling Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam, he says, لم آل أن أزوجك خير أهلي. He said, I never stopped, essentially looking for the best one to marry you to. Basically saying that I married you to the best of ahli, the best of my family, referring to Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam. Saying, he's telling Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam, I married you to the best possible suitor for you, the best possible match, and that he is the best from amongst my Ahl al-Bayt, right? Now, why did the Prophet alayhi salatu salam say that or do that? Sometimes, subhanallah, and I don't know if any of you have seen this before. However, unfortunately, I have seen it. I have witnessed it myself, where unfortunately sometimes, on the night of the marriage, when obviously, the wife is going to be essentially starting her life with her husband, inshallah. Sometimes you'll find some individuals kind of, they'll see that their daughter is a little bit hesitant, and because of that, they might say things like, oh, he's a good guy. Essentially they try to calm her by, telling her to have patience, he's a good guy, etc., etc., which kind of belittles the groom. Okay, it takes away from the honor of the groom, because essentially, they're kind of just, telling her, don't worry, he's a good guy, and it's okay to settle, essentially. However, here the Prophet ﷺ is doing the complete opposite, and he's telling her that there is absolutely no one better for you, and there is no one better, period, that you could be marrying. So, elevating his status and honoring Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam on the night of his marriage to Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam. Now comes the very long hadith, which is over 2 pages long. So once in a while I'll throw in some Arabic, and once in a while I'll just translate for the sake of time, inshallah. This hadith was an Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma. Okay. He says, and it actually says in the hadith, وقال في حديث طويل, he says in a very long hadith, دعا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بلالا. So the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام called Bilal, and he said to him, I have given Fatima in marriage to my ibn Ammi, which is essentially my cousin. Okay, obviously meaning Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam. And then he said, وأنا أحب أن يكون من أخلاق أمتي الطعام عند النكاح. And he said, I would like that, the Prophet ﷺ is speaking, he says, I would like that it would be of the akhlaq and the manners of my ummah, of my nation, my followers, that they feed people at the time of the nikah. So he told Bilal radiallahu anhu, he says, go essentially to the cattle, obviously, sacrifice some animals in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course. And then he told him to take khams amdad, which is like 5 handfuls of, be it like rice, etc. Okay, other than the meat. So he told them to go take care of the meats and to take care of, let's call it I get well, like I said, it could refer to rice, it could refer to other things as well, it could refer to wheat, etc. And then he says, فاجعل لي قصعة لعلي أجعل أجمع عليها المهاجرين والأنصار. And he says essentially, start preparing everything, and I'm going to call all of the muhajirin and all of the ansar. This is a lot of people. Okay. And then Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu, obviously he listened to him. And then when he was done, he came back to him, and then he, brought everything in front of the Prophet alayhi salatu salam. And then essentially the Prophet alayhi salatu salam blessed it with his blessed hands alayhi salatu salam to put barakah in it so that everybody is able to eat from it. And then he said, Ud'u an-nas ila al-masjid. He said, call everybody to the masjid. And subhanAllah, and he's teaching Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu akhlaq as to how to entertain your guests. And he says, وَلَا تُفَارِقْ. He says, don't ever. So essentially, the Prophet ﷺ was telling him to allow them, because of the amount of people they were, large groups of people. He said, bring them in groups, and essentially, never, anytime you bring in a group, never leave that group alone. Don't leave that group and go to another one. He said, as you're feeding the first group and you're making sure that all their needs are taken care of, they've all eaten to their fill, etc. Then once you're done with them, you bring in another group and you do the same thing over and over again. All right. Okay. And again, like I said, he keeps doing that over and over until every single one has eaten to their full. And then after that, قال صلى الله عليه وسلم يا بلال احملها إلى أمهاتك. Now take everything and let's go to the al-Mu'mineen, so the wives of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. He says, and he says, say to them, eat to your fill, and feed all of the women who come in to their fill, until they're full. So he did just that. He took everything to the wives of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And then after the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam had caught up with them, and then he said to them, he's now announcing to all of the women that were there, obviously including his wives, alayhi salatu salam, wa alayhinna salam, and all the women that were there. He says, Inni qad zawajtu ibnati min ibn ammi. He says, I have married off my daughter to my cousin, obviously Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam. And then he says, وَقَدْ عَلِّمْتُنَّ مَنْزِلَتَهَا مِنِّي. And you all know her status in my heart. Okay? And he says after that, and now I am, essentially handing her off to Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam. So he says, everybody, please, essentially give her your blessings, give her your blessings and say your salam to her before we hand her off to Sayyidina Ali. So then all the women got up, and essentially every single one of them, and this was a sunnah of the woman during the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, that every single one of them would take off some piece of jewelry, whether it was a bracelet, a ring, a necklace, etc., earrings, whatever it was that they had, as a gift to the bride. And they also, like we said, they gave her nice perfumes, etc. وَجَعَلْنَا فِي بَيْتِهَا فِرَاشًا. And then also, just similarly, when we discussed about how Sitna Aisha and Salama radiallahu anhunna prepared her home with the with the special type of materials and beddings, and how the Prophet ﷺ did the same, and they furnished their home, etc. So same thing here. More of the women of the community gave more gifts to her, etc., in preparation of their home and their life together, etc. And then as well, they also gave her, different types of very fancy and beautiful types of clothes. So different types of gifts, okay, constantly. And then ثم إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أقبل وهو وعلي ابن أبي طالب كرم الله وجهه حتى جلس مجلسهما. And then after all the women finished, the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام came with Sayyidina Ali عليه السلام, and they sat down. And then so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is sitting down with Sayyidina Ali, and then Fatima alayhi salam is sitting with the women. وبينهن وبين رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حجاب فهتف يا فاطمة. So now, because I'm not sure if we've discussed this in the past. However, there was a partition between the men and the women. In this specific scenario, why? Because the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were there. Because the partition was only implemented or used when the wives of the Prophet ﷺ was there. Anytime the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were not there, there was no partition or anything like that, just like there wasn't a partition in the masjid or anything like that, okay? Anytime the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were there, there was a partition. There are many wisdoms for that. One of which that we can quickly mention is because, like we said, after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ, the rule was that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were not allowed to remarry. Okay, for many reasons, and for that reason, there was no point for anybody to be able to see the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, so that shaitan doesn't play with their heads and they get attracted to them, etc., etc. In any case, so in this case, the men were on one side, the women were on another, and there was a partition because the wives were there, alayhinna salam. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he called Fatima. He said, "Ya Fatima alayha salam radiyallahu anha." When she came up to the Prophet alayhi salatu salam, because like I said, she was also with Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers, or the mothers of the believers, in behind that partition. She didn't see that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu was sitting with the Prophet alayhi salatu salam when the Prophet called her up alayhi salatu salam. So she came up, and then when she saw Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, she ended up becoming very she was startled. She wasn't expecting him to be there. She was expecting the Prophet alayhi salatu salam, and then she became very shy and emotional, which is very normal on the night of marriage, especially for women, for our sisters. So she became very emotional. She started crying, etc. And then the Prophet ﷺ told her, he said, "Come to me." And then he took her by her hand when she came up, and also by the hand of Sayyidina Ali. So he had Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam and Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, both by the hand. And then when the Prophet ﷺ wanted to put her hand in the hand of Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, she kind of pulled back. She was scared. She was nervous. And then her eyes filled with tears again. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't want Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu alayhi salam to kind of feel bad or anything. So he lifted his head and he looked at Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, and he looked at him with a look of mercy, if you would, because he said, maybe in his mind, the Prophet ﷺ was saying that he was worried that maybe Fatima alayhi was worried and nervous because Sayyidina Ali alayhi didn't have anything. He didn't have much wealth. Okay? So because of that, the Prophet ﷺ said the following. Again, he repeated what he repeated in the last hadith. He said, Ya Fatima, I have married you and you are getting married to the best of people, to the best of my family, being Sayyidina Ali. And then he says, and then he swore by Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and listen to this, beautiful. He says, I have married you off to a sayyid fi dunya, a leader in this dunya. A sayyid, sayyidan fi dunya. And then, وَإِنَّهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. And that he, Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, in the akhirah is from the salihin, from the righteous. So right off the bat, he's, emphasizing the fact that he is the best of people. He is the best of my family. He is a leader, one of the greatest leaders in this world, and the righteous in the hereafter. Subhanallah. So he's not, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, speaking so highly, trying to show off his daughter. It's quite the opposite. He's trying to comfort his daughter and telling her that, like, don't worry, like, this is the best option and the best of husbands that you can ever ask for. So then after that, she alayhi salam, Fatima alayhi salam, kind of felt a little bit more at peace. She calmed down, and she allowed him to take his hand and put it in the hand of Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam. And then he made dua for them. He says, I'm sorry, before that, he told them, he said, go to your home. Okay, go to your home. He said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put khair between you, etc. And so he told them, go to your home. He said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put khair between the two of you. Jama Allahu baynakuma wa aslaha balakuma la tahija sababan hatta atikuma. He says, don't do anything until I come see you. Go to your home. Just wait for me. I'm going to come see you alone. Okay. So now we're going to get out of everybody's face and out of everybody's eyes, and I'm going to come see you. So now, after that, so they went. فأقبل حتى جلس مجلسهما. So now they went, they sat down, Sayyidina Ali and Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam, وعندهما أمهات المؤمنين والنساء. And now it was just amongst the women. Okay, so Sayyidina Ali and Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam, they went to their home, and now it was just the women that were there. So obviously the wives of the Prophet alayhi salam, plus the other women of the community. And now Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam is sitting with the women. ثم أقبل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حتى دق الباب. So now when the Prophet alayhi salam came, he knocked on the door. فقالت له So Ayman asked, who is it? And he says, أنا Rasoul Allah. He says, it's me, the Prophet of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم. ففتح له الباب. ففتحت له الباب. She opened the door for him. And then she said to him, بأبي أنت وأمي. You know how they always say, I would sacrifice my mother and my father for you, O Rasulullah. That's essentially what she said. And then the Prophet ﷺ asked her, he says, subhanAllah, he says, is my brother here? O Ayman, is my brother here? She said, who's your brother? Like, he's literally said, my brother, akhi. She said, who's your brother? And then he says, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salam, radiallahu anhu. And then Ayman, radiallahu anha, She says, Ya Rasoul Allah, huwa akhuk. And she says to him, she said, he's your brother and you're marrying him off to your daughter? and then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, yes. And subhanallah, look at her adab. She didn't sit there arguing with him. Oh, but isn't it haram, etc., etc. She says, إنما يعرف الحلال والحرام بك. He says, the halal and haram, you know best. And we learn it from you, O Rasulullah. Look at the adab, look at the akhlaq, the manners of Ummi Ayman, radiallahu anha. So then, فدخل وخرجنا النساء مسرعات. So now, when he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, came in, all the women left quickly. And then Asma bint Umays stayed. And then she looked at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then she says to him, Asma bint Umays is a very special lady. Let me finish this and I'll come back to that. She says to him, O Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is there not going to be any women here with you for Fatima? I apologize. Before that, someone's called out Ya Rasulullah, and he didn't realize who it was yet. He said, who is it? She said, it's me, Asma bint Umays. He said, there's no other woman here, and Fatima needs someone, needs a woman to be with her. And essentially, the Prophet ﷺ then asked her, he said, did you only stay back for this reason, or is there something else that you need? She said, no, I swear that essentially that's the only reason I'm here. I want to be here to support Fatima alayhi salam. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a dua for her because of what she did. He says, فَأَسْأَلُ اللَّهِ, he says, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ilahi أن يحرسك, and that he protects you from above you, from under you, from your right, from your left, from behind you, from in front of you, from ash-shaytan al-rajim, from the accursed shaitan. And then he asked her to please, give him the water. There was some water as well, etc. And then all this, by the way, is one hadith. So then Asma bint Umays, gave the water to the Prophet alayhi salatu salam. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua. Allahumma innahuma minni. Listen to this beautiful dua he made for Sitna Fatima alayhi salam and Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam. Says, oh Allah, they are from me. Innahuma, both of them, they are from me. Wa ana minhuma, and I am from them. Allahumma kama adhabta anni ar-rijsa wa tahhartani fatahhirhuma. He said, oh Allah, as you have purified me of any impurities, purify them of any impurities. Can you imagine that? The Prophet ﷺ is making this dua for Sitna Fatima and Sayyidina Ali alayhim as-salam, a dua which asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something that the Prophet ﷺ only himself was blessed with, from having being purified from all those impurities. If you remember a while back, when we discussed how Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, opened him up and washed his heart, etc. The Prophet alayhi salam is making this beautiful dua specifically for Sayyidina Fatima and Sayyidina Ali alayhim as-salam. And then he called Fatima to come close to him. And then she came in her bridal dress, essentially. And then he put one hand on her chest and one hand between her shoulders. So kind of like this. So like in front of her and from behind her, like that. ثم نضح جلدها so then after he put his hands on her chest and on her back like that, he made that dua, and then using that water that Asma bint Umays brought, that he had made dua upon as well, he sprinkled her with that water. And then he made another dua. He says, Allahumma innahu. Again, he repeated that same dua that we just read. Allahumma innahuma minni wa ana minhuma, etc. Allahumma kama adhabta anni rijsa wa tahhartani fatahhiruhuma, etc. So he read that dua again while having his hands on Sitna Fatima alayha salam. And then after that, he asked her to drink from the water as well, and to kind of make madmada, when you make wudu, when you rinse your mouth and your nose, etc. He asked her to do that with some of the water as well. ثم دعا بمخضب آخر. And then he asked for another pitcher of water, and he essentially did exactly the same thing. And then he did the same thing with Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, in making that dua for him and sprinkling the water on Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam. Now, okay, so essentially that's the end of the hadith. That's essentially the end of hadith. Now, why did the Prophet ﷺ tell them to go to their homes? Give me a second, I'm going to show up. Because he wanted to make this dua for them and to protect them from any ayn or hasad. So from any evil eye or any jealousy from anybody who obviously had seen them on their wedding night, from either side. So before, they start their lives together, the Prophet ﷺ wanted to make sure that they took a moment to protect themselves from anybody's eyes in the community that had seen them on their wedding night, and possibly, had been jealous or anything like that. So to protect them, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would protect them, the Prophet ﷺ went, made these du'as for them, made the du'as on the water, sprinkled the water on them, etc., etc., etc. And then after he was done, he left, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and left them to be alone, but only after he made sure that he did all the du'as and everything necessary to push the evil eye away and push anything from shaitan away, so that their lives don't start off with these type of issues. So this is a very, very important sunnah for us to remember, for ourselves, for our children, for our families, to remind them that this is what the Prophet ﷺ did for Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam and Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam on the night of the marriage. Before they did anything, before they started their lives together, he made sure that they were protected. They were protected by any evil that was or could have been intended for them. Alayhi salatu wassalam. I think that's it on time. So again, you see, subhanAllah, sometimes, I'll just finish off with this quickly. Sometimes in certain weddings, you have different cultures obviously have the different practices and things like that. However, there are some cultures where you'll find the groom will go into the area of where only the sisters are, etc. And then some people make this big deal, astaghfirullah al-azim. Now look, whatever happens inside, if it's if, for example, some women who are supposed to be wearing hijab are not wearing hijab, then of course that is unacceptable. However, the idea of Sayyidina Ali going into, in there with his wife essentially, and just with the woman, this is something that has been practiced since the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Okay, obviously within the hudud, if you would, within the limits of the Sharia, of course. If somebody, takes those practices and implements things that are not a part of the Sharia, that is upon them, and that is between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that should be corrected. However, that does not mean that the other sunnah should be completely avoided. In any case, this is essentially what happened here. And then you saw, and we saw from every single person other than the groom and the bride, we saw the father of the bride, the wives of the father of the bride, taking care of the newlyweds, the community stepping up and providing the food, providing the gifts, providing you know the essentially the furniture, if you would, for the home. Just, you guys sit back and relax. We will take care of everything. So you see, this is a real community. This is a community that the Prophet ﷺ built. And this is the type of community that the Prophet ﷺ taught us to have. However, subhanAllah, nowadays when somebody's in need, nobody steps up, unfortunately, until the point that we kind of wait for the person to kind of, almost, beg for help, unfortunately. Whereas, look at these hadith, right away, everybody took it upon himself. Oh, Prophet of Allah, alayhi salatu salam, I got the meats, I got this, I got that, I'll take care of this, I'll take care of that. Everybody stepped up with whatever they could to make sure that their brother and their sister were taken care of and didn't have to worry about a thing. This is an ummah. This is a community. This is the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is how we should be with, our brothers and sisters locally, abroad, suffering abroad. Unfortunately, we're all seeing it nowadays. Everybody's watching the suffering going on, and everybody's silent. The ones who are able to do something are completely silent. And the ones who have their hands tied and can't do too much, everybody's hitting the streets and making dua. And we're doing everything we can. And subhanallah, it's sad. It's sad to see where the Prophet ﷺ, how he raised us, or raised the ummah to be, and the community to be, and where we are now. It's really sad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bring us back to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, so that we're able to practice our beautiful deen as was taught by the Prophet ﷺ. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallam. Wa jazakumullahu khair.